Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's event with a very special guest, Joseph Nunez, the Public Relations and Partnerships Manager of Club Med. Joseph, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm so well, and we're really lucky to have you. I'm so excited to have you. For those listening on YouTube, be sure to subscribe. And Joseph, we have 45 minutes today, so let's just jump right into it. Can you tell us about yourself and your professional background?
Sure thing. But like you mentioned, I am currently the Public Relations and Partnerships Manager for Club Med. I oversee the North America region. So what that means is for our almost 70 plus resorts, it is my responsibility to make sure we communicate all of our news to the North America market. That does include US, Caribbean, Mexico, and Canada. Prior to coming here, I was working at Quinn, which is a public relations firm based out of New York City and Miami, where I worked a lot on travel, real estate, food and beverage, and hospitality. And then prior to Quinn, I actually was a publicist for SeaWorld, Parks and Resorts based out of corporate office in Orlando. I also had the chance to work with Disney and Universal in their PR departments prior to that. And I did graduate from the University of Central Florida, where I received a bachelor's degree in communications and marketing.
It sounds like you've worked with the creme de la creme of travel companies, and that's amazing. So congratulations to you on that. Club Med it's a special company with a unique history. What appeals to you about this brand?
I think what really drew me to Club Med was just, when I was working at the agency, I worked on a variety of different clients, and I really missed really working specifically in that travel and tourism and making sure that we're selling this vacation dream, these memories that kind of last a lifetime. And coming to Club Med, I think the number one thing is, Club Med pioneered the thought of what an all-inclusive is. They created the concept of all-inclusive. It's such a legacy brand. It's global. We have resorts in almost every single continent across the globe. It's very international. Even in my own office, I can't even count on my hands how many different nationalities I work with. So to me, that was really like the spirit that I was looking for. And I love to travel. I love the industry of tourism. And Club Med was, like I said, the pioneer.
As you mentioned, Club Med has so many resorts around the world in Mexico, Florida, the Caribbean, Europe, Asia, Brazil, you name it, nearly everywhere. Can you walk us through the challenges? And you mentioned so many different resorts. Can you walk us through the challenges and the unique opportunities of public relations for such a vast collection of international properties?
Definitely. I think, first and foremost, public relations is a facet of the communication industry, the communication field. And when you are working on such a global company as Club Med, or even, when I was at Disney, communication is key. It's ensuring that you're able to communicate with all of your teams across the globe, and kind of helping to everybody come together and identify what the brand story is, and being able to kind of a compelling way to create that story and tell it. One of the advantages that we have here is that we have our North America office. We have our office in Europe. We have our office in Asia. We have a team that we work that's closely tied to the U.S. Team in Canada as well. And having such an international company and so many people across the globe, we're able to kind of share best practices. We're able to get information very quickly. Just recently, I was working on a story surrounding a resort in Japan, so I was able to touch base with the Asian team and get the information needed from them, and being able to share that with our media here. At the same time, communication can be a challenge as we have teams all over the world. We're not all in the same time frame, so kind of scheduling meetings can get a little dicey sometimes. But it's great that we appeal to such a large demographic, and we can learn from each other. What are you seeing in China? What are the trends there, and how can we apply that to our market here, and vice versa? What are we doing that's fast that you guys can kind of incorporate into your strategies as well?
That's really interesting. And just to follow up on that, as you mentioned, you have an international team. I would imagine you have team members who speak English, who speak Spanish, who speak Chinese, Japanese, as you mentioned. Which languages other than English does Club Med actively seek out publicity opportunities and opportunities to share your wonderful story.
For sure. We are, like you said, English is the primary language. It's the international language, I think, with any company you work with. So everybody who works at Club Med definitely needs to have a good foundation, being able to communicate with everybody across the globe in English. But the second language that we have here that really is up there with English is French. Our company is based out of Paris. So all of our corporate team members speak French fluently, and even in my office, most, except myself, most of the people speak French. And we have a big French demographic to all of our resorts, including the Caribbean. So that's definitely a good skill to have here.
So are you working on your French?
Starting to, yes. I speak English and I speak Spanish fluently, a little bit of Portuguese, but as I started working here, I'm starting to pick up a little bit of the French. But I'm not quite there yet.
One day at a time. And what does excellence in travel PR mean to you, Joseph?
To me, achieving excellence in travel PR really takes the ability to adapt, the ability to kind of see what's trending, what's coming up next, identifying those trends, and how we can kind of maneuver ourselves to always be, top of mind in every conversation. You have to be able to effectively paint, the picture of a destination and kind of create that wanderlust feeling that people want to have, and it's what drives them to book and, visit different destinations and resorts. But really, and to be more specific to PR, aside from travel, is you want to make sure anytime you work in PR that you are a reliable news source. I think that's definitely the goal of every publicist, is to be sought after by editors and journalists to, what's new, what's next. I know I can count on you. I know you're reliable. I know you give us, very transparent information. And in addition to that, to excel in this field, you have to be able to penetrate new markets, new mediums, especially with social media and the digital age. There's so many different opportunities and so many different channels that you can communicate your message to. So it's always being able to, be on top of the trends, know what's going on in the field, and being a reliable news source.
Mexico City just suffered a massive earthquake, as you know, two of them, sadly. South Florida just experienced a big hurricane, same with Puerto Rico. Can you walk us through how you and your colleagues at Club Med address international disasters like these?
Yes, we've been knee-deep, as you know. We had to reschedule our last webinar. We've had so many hurricanes come through, so many natural disasters, and our team, like most companies, our priority is making sure everybody's safe, everybody's secure. So how do we do that? We have a crisis team that is appointed here in the office. That does include myself from the communication standpoint. But we also have operations, we have legal, we have our social media team, we make sure our marketing team's involved, our financial team, and our resort teams. We have specific people at each resort that are appointed to kind of be the leaders during these crises. So for us, we met almost daily during the whole hurricane season. We're still in hurricane season, so fingers crossed we don't get any more. We have, one or two representatives from each team present. We talk about what our priorities are. We talk about what our concerns are, what we need to do. How do we prepare the resorts? From my side, how do we communicate that to our employees? How do we communicate that to the members that are at the resort? And, also for media, they're asking questions on social media. We're getting things coming in, asking, has the resort fine, or I have a reservation coming up? How is that looking? Making sure, for us, especially in PR and communications, is we're the liaison. So I'm in there in the weeds of it, making sure I get all the right information. I know everything that's happening in the resort, everything that our teams are preparing, and I act as the liaison with the public and make sure, anytime media ask, or our consumers, or our members, or anybody on social, I need to have the latest information to share with them. So it is a process. Not much sleep involved, of course, so it's 24/7 cycle. But I think the number one thing that I can kind of tell people when they're in a situation like this is make sure you have a crisis plan ahead of time. Before the hurricane hit, we already had a plan of how we would address these things. So for us, we have our crisis team that's appointed, and at a moment's notice, we get the call, we get a text message, we get an email, whatever it is, and we drop everything and we make sure that we're on top of whatever we need to do.
It's impressive that you all, despite the size of the team, it's impressive that you managed to stay on top of everything going on in the world in your territories, essentially.
Yes, it's we have close relationships with our resort teams, and that also comes with the PR field. Make sure you have those relationships established. Make sure you're trustworthy and that they know that they need to communicate everything to you. But our resorts have a great teams too, and they've been working with us here from the support center. We're able to provide them what they need, and they give us what they tell us what they need from us, and we're able to kind of work together that way.
You're obviously a very busy person. What does a typical week look like for you?
Um, I can't say I have a typical week. I don't think any of my days are typical. Um, since I joined the team here, I haven't had a single day that looks like any other day. But I will say, at least the standard, Mondays, of course, are our planning days. That's when I meet with my PR agency. We talk about our top initiatives, what we need to focus on for the week, what's going on in the landscape, things we need to be aware of, making sure if there's any, for example, the hurricanes, we are start monitoring that way before they even get close to our resorts, and we prepare ahead of time. We talk about new renovations or anything new happening in our resorts. All of that kind of happens in our PR meeting every Monday. Monday, I also meet with our marketing team, so we want to make sure that PR is aligning with marketing and making sure marketing is aware of what we're doing on the PR side. So we all kind of get together, and that includes our digital team, our social team, or myself from the PR team. We have, people from financial, from bookings, operations. We all kind of get together, talk about what's happening on that specific week. And then Wednesday specifically is when I meet with my supervisors, and we meet specifically with the communication teams to talk about what our objectives are, what we're working on, and what we need to align with. Aside from that, it's just, it's a lot of reactive PR as well. We are such a global company that we have media and journalists and bloggers and influencers contacting us every day for information and ways to work with us. At the same time, we take a proactive approach where we know, XYZ is happening at this resort, so how do we communicate that? Let's focus on XYZ for this week.
Audience members, if you have questions for Joseph, and I hope you do, submit those questions right here within GoToWebinar or via Twitter, however you prefer, and we will take them at the end. Joseph, for communications and PR students listening in, what advice can you offer on landing a fantastic job in public relations?
Yeah, I have a lot of different tips I can provide. I hire a lot of new graduates, and previously a lot of the interns that I worked with, I can always kind of tell who are the ones that are really into the field. So for me, the first and foremost is if you want to work in travel PR or you want to work in PR period, you need to have a passion for it. It shows, definitely, even when you're interviewing. Like, this isn't a field that's for the faint-hearted. You're working late hours, you're working early in the morning, you're on call. But it's also a fascinating field, and you get to work some really cool projects. So definitely have a passion for it. The most important thing that I need to see when I am about to hire somebody new into the field is you need to have a couple good internships under your belt. That's what helped me. Coming out of college, I started my first job at Disney in their PR department as a coordinator, and what helped me get there was the fact that I had a couple internships under my belt in travel and tourism ahead of that. So I was able to kind of network my way in and then build my portfolio. So network, build your internships, make sure you always have a portfolio ready. You need to be willing to learn, to grow, to explore. PR changes day to day, so you want to make sure you're always willing to adapt to it. And the biggest piece of advice that I can give anybody, and that goes hand in hand with a portfolio, is you need to write. You need to write as much as you can every day. You need to polish that skill. It's the most important thing you can have in this field.
I do hope many students take your advice, because you're obviously someone who doesn't just preach these things, but this is your life experience.
Mm-hmm.
And Joseph, considering the worldwide reach of Club Med, as we've been discussing, there's so many disasters going on right now. How frequently does your job involve crisis management?
I'm not sure if I would say frequent. It's kind of sporadic. I will say, especially things like natural disasters, hurricanes are unpredictable. So there's times where we were focusing on Hurricane Irma so much, 24/7, and then we had like a day break before then all of a sudden we started seeing Maria form. So, for the past few weeks I've been focusing strictly on that. But prior to that, I didn't have anything, fortunately, knock on wood, that I had to deal with. But we are such a global company that we are always monitoring, and not just monitoring media, but monitoring our social media. our reviews on different websites, making sure we're always kind of up to speed as what's happening in our resorts. And based on that, we prepare ahead of time. I think the best thing you can do for a crisis is to make sure you have a plan of action before it even hits. If you see something brewing, something's about to happen, you need to make sure you have that prepared. But I will say, like I said, we have global teams everywhere, so we're able to assist with each other. I focus a little bit more on our perception here in the U.S. and making sure that everything's good from a crisis standpoint. So it's part of the job, but it's not an everyday thing.
On a more upbeat note, you mentioned earlier in our conversation today that you're working with bloggers, with influencers, and of course the media. As you know, YouTubers and influencers have just taken over the world. Can you walk us through how you work with all of these different influencers of sorts, as well as the media, of course?
Yeah, definitely. Bloggers, influencers, freelancers, that's been, I can't even say it's on the rise anymore. It's just a standard in the industry. So you want to make sure you always treat them the same way you would work with a journalist. These are people that have, very engaged followings, and, we have our mass influencers with their reach in the millions, but you also have micro influencers. Maybe they have, only 20, 30,000 followers, but they're exactly the niche market you're looking for. They're very engaged. There's people that follow these people die hard and will book, anything they try to sell you. So for us, like I said, it's both reactive and proactive. There's opportunities that come to us, and we vet them properly. We look at their numbers, we look at who's following them, we look at their demographic, how engaged they are, and making sure that they fit into the brand of Club Med. But also on an active basis, we take all those same elements and we start to seek those influencers that we think are going to be able to not only tell the Club Med story, but be able to kind of create their own compelling stories surrounding our brand and tell that to their followers, to their readers, anybody that is a fan of theirs. So we work very closely with them. There's no set formula per se. It's just a matter of if you have a mommy blogger, of course we're going to focus more on the kids' activities. If you have somebody who works in the beauty industry, we're going to focus more on their spas and the different offerings we have there. Right now, we're working with a few fitness bloggers for our Sandpiper Bay Resort, which is our active lifestyle resort. So we work with more of that fitness type of influencer to come see the resort and experience like the water sports activities. So we work with them very individually, and I think that's the key thing. Just kind of a trend that we're seeing too in the field is people don't want mass market trips. They want to have individualized experiences.
And that sounds like, well, actually, it sounds like the way that you would work with a journalist. Every journalist has their own side, and obviously influencers have their own angle on things.
Yeah, no, it's there's no clear division anymore. Of course, there's little nuances of different ways to work with them since the content they need is a little bit different, a newspaper versus an Instagrammer. But at the end of the day, these are people that are able to share news on your organization, and you want to make sure you treat them the same way and provide them with anything they need for their content.
You've had PR roles at the Walt Disney Company, SeaWorld, and now Club Med. These are three world-class brands. There's no other way to put it. What have you learned working with each of these companies?
I've been very blessed to work with these companies. I think it's an opportunity that has really shaped me in my career and taken me as far as it has. And I have to say they're all very unique companies. On top of that, I've had a couple other companies that I've worked with too that are, maybe they're not the biggest names compared to like Disney, but they still teach you something valuable. Out of all these companies, and this is something that was really big at Disney and something that we really promote here at Club Med, is you want to make sure you're innovative. You want to make sure you're always looking for opportunities to kind of go above and beyond, seek new ways to kind of do things, think of outside of the box ideas, and make sure that you're always kind of on top of the trends. Something that a lot of these companies I work with do, and I've been fortunate to be a part of, is we're always looking to the future. What trends are we seeing, and how can we be a part of them before they become, huge and big? And what's really important about working for a very established brand, it's both an opportunity and a challenge, is you have to learn what their voice is. You have to learn what their story is, and you want to make sure you fit into it. So while you're thinking of being very creative and out of the box, you still have to keep to what their legacy is. Disney has a very unique voice, has a very unique background, and you have to always keep that in mind when you're working with them. Same thing with Club Med. We're always thinking of what can we do to make sure we're still, relevant in today's age, but we want to make sure we keep our core. And when you first start a job in one of these companies, that should be the first thing you dive into is, what is the history, what is the voice, what is the story, and how can I weave that into everything I do?
Experiment, but be mindful to the core and the history. Respect the history. I like that. How
Definitely.
is travel PR? How is travel PR different today from the way it was 5 years ago?
Yeah, just like we mentioned earlier, I think even, it's hard to think about because now influencers and bloggers and everything are such a key part of our everyday. But even just 5 years ago, I remember this not being as big as it is. I remember bloggers being almost like a secondary initiative in a lot of the PR plans and strategies, where now they are equal to our journalists. Even, as companies unfortunately start to kind of lay off a lot of their editorial teams, like we're working with a lot of bloggers, we're working with a lot of freelancers, people that are pitching ideas to the both traditional and non-traditional outlets. And I think the biggest change we've seen is, it's not a matter of shifting to digital. We're already in digital and we've been in digital, but kind of being able to work with so many different outlets and demographics. Before you had your big name outlets that you wanted to pitch and land, and now you have hundreds of outlets that you can be in, and each of them have their own niche demographics, and it's a matter of identifying those and how you can work with them. And really, a big thing is as we continue pushing forward in PR, is finding out how we're able to really measure our efforts and provide those metrics to, your marketing higher up.
Definitely. And before we continue, audience members, your questions are rolling in. Keep sending those, and we will absolutely take them at the end of today's event. Joseph, how will travel, PR, and hospitality as a whole progress over the next 5 years?
I wish I had a magic ball that I could kind of look into and identify, but I think the most important thing is if you're looking for what's going to happen next, is you want to be very vigilant now. You want to listen to those conversations happening in the field. You want to follow all these different, research companies that are putting out all these different reports, such as Skift, and listen to people that work in the field, being able to network, learn from other people. As you start to piece all those pieces together, you're going to see what the industry is moving towards. I think from my personal experience, storytelling has been a big part of how we do PR now, and I think we're only going to see that get stronger. But part of that is just a matter of what new channels can we work with now, identifying what those look like, whether it's, television has changed so much. Now you have streaming online. Personally, I get a lot of my news on my cell phone. So it's just a matter of look for those trends, see how technology is changing, see how PR fits into that, and being able to think of creative ways to bring stories alive. And don't be afraid to kind of look at new outlets or new channels. But yeah, I think we're going to continue seeing a big growth on storytelling and being able to be reliable, and we need to make sure we are content creators. We rely on media to tell our story, but we ourselves have to create that content and be storytellers in ourselves.
Well, it's great to hear. It's refreshing to hear, honestly, that you and your colleagues are so prepared for the future. It's almost like who knows what the future will be, but if you're ready for anything, who cares?
Yeah, the key is you have to be able to adapt at any moment. Club Med has been around for many, many decades, so what we used to do back then is not necessarily what we need to do now. We continue to adapt with the demographic. Millennials are such a huge thing for us too, so what are they looking for? What trends are we seeing between them, and what do they want out of travel? For example, it's not always just about the destination anymore. Sometimes they're seeking these transformational experiences. So how can we as a brand incorporate that? For me, like I said, I handle PR, but I also handle partnerships. So what companies are they aligning themselves with that our brand can also align with? And I think as you start to do that, you'll start to kind of see what the future looks like for your brand.
Interesting. And before we continue, can you elaborate on the partnership side of your role?
Yeah, for sure. This is something that's kind of a little bit more newer to me because I come from a very traditional PR background, but during my last role, I was able to kind of start handling a lot more partnerships, and coming into this new role, it's a big part of my job. So not only am I working with media and garnering editorial coverage on the PR side, but I'm also identifying what other brands can Club Med partner with and what can we offer to our members to make sure we stay relevant, make sure we reach the right demographic, and make sure we offer, really great experiences for people. There's so many resorts in the world, there's so many hotels. What makes us different, and what can we provide that, maybe other people can't? And I will say I can talk about this one example, even though I wasn't here at the time it was formed, but it is something that's part of my role moving forward. We aligned that, we have a lot of our resorts have circus schools, trapeze activities. So we looked at Cirque du Soleil as being, the pioneers of that too. Like they're the ones who kind of made it such mass market. And there was a partnership that was created between our organizations. And now we have, this entire Cirque du Soleil type gym that's in our Punta Cana resort. And that was born out of the partnership. So it's looking at those opportunities, and also, of course, on the promotional side, you look at brands that you can partner with to help sponsor content. There's the line between editorial and advertising continues to get blurred every single day. Fortunately, I don't handle advertising, but there's times when you do have to pay for specific content, and you want to make sure that you're doing it well. So that's kind of where the partnership side comes in.
Okay, we have some questions coming in, so let's go ahead and take those. The first question comes from Jennifer, and she asks, how do you measure PR results against business results? And the second part of her question is, what is your KPI, in other words?
That's very tough. I think working in PR, that's something that we struggle with every day. Personally, at least from my side, I don't measure the ad value of placements. I think that's something that's a little bit archaic and in a way kind of a made-up number. That's my opinion from the companies I worked with. So for me, I measure a combination of the circulation and the reach of the different websites, the different newspapers, magazines we work with, making sure we know what is the total potential reach. And we calculate that versus, of course, how much we are spending in our PR efforts. On top of that, some magazines may not have great numbers, but they're exactly the demographic you want. So for me, when we're pulling coverage reports, it's not just numbers, but it's also who is reading this magazine, where is it being distributed, what markets, what is the demographic of their readers. And also, as we look at the digital PR side, we are able, at least from our end, to create content-specific links that we're able to put into websites and see how much traffic these editorial articles are driving into our website, and how many of those people are booking. So sometimes you can see more of that business analytics side from that end. But from a print side, of course, it's a little bit impossible to do. So at that point, we look at numbers and we look at the demographic of the publication.
Definitely. We have another follow-up question. Are family trips still a good, or fam trips? Are fam trips still a good tactic, or do media today even have time to jet off for a week or two? Generally, what are best tactics you use to connect with media and generate positive coverage?
That is a great question. Especially as something that we are looking at right now. Standard, we host a few different press trips every year for our resorts to talk about what's new, showcase what we have. Anytime there's something huge like that, like for example, if we're completely renovating a resort, then we do rely on fam trips because we want to bring as many people as we can at the same time to kind of unveil these new findings. But we are finding, as part of our working with media directly, and we ask them, don't ever be afraid of asking for feedback from media. We tell them what works best for you, what doesn't. And we are finding that a lot of them are sharing with us that they don't like these mass cricket trips unless there's something, worthwhile, like a press conference. So lately, specifically with some of the resorts I'm working with right now, instead of hosting a bunch of people at the same time, we are sending them individually. We kind of create these customized itineraries for them. We host them on their own. If we can have a rep there with them, sometimes it's good just to have a face to the brand, but creating those individualized itineraries sometimes are a little bit more impactful than the mass fam trips.
Okay. And we have a question from a PR student, Steve. He's asking if you have any internship tips, and he's also asking if your friends are extremely jealous of your job.
um, well, the first question, internship tips. For me, it's you want to make sure you again bring the passion to the interview. Make sure you kind of take a look at what the company culture is, because at the end of the day, that's a big part when I'm interviewing somebody for our internship position here. I don't just look at their experience. I don't just look at their portfolio, but I see how they interact with us. I know what our marketing team is like here, and I want to make sure that I hire somebody that they're comfortable with, but I also want to hire somebody who's comfortable with us. I don't ever want to put somebody in a position where they don't feel like they fit in. So study the culture of the company. Definitely have your portfolio ready. And when you're in an internship, do as much as you can. I always tell people PR is that one field that you can work in anything. You can work in travel. You can work in healthcare. You can work in technology. You work in nonprofit. I've been able to, when I was in college, I did several internships, and that's how I fell into travel and tourism, because I realized that's what I enjoyed the most. But when you're an intern, don't be afraid to mess up. Take the risk. Like you're in a position that your job's not at risk if you're an intern. So it's the time to explore it and kind of think of those really creative, out of the box ideas, and use that time to network. Let's say you're working for a company and you have a team of 20, 30 people, and take time to ask them, hey, can we go to lunch sometime? I just want to learn more about your career path, or I want to get your advice on this. And trust me, I did that a lot when I was at Disney, actually. Those meet and greets, which are encouraged, and I learned so much from people, and it helped shape my career.
Wow, so a lot of mentoring going on.
Yes, always have somebody that you can kind of go to. And it doesn't have to be one person. It can be, your supervisor. It can be somebody who's not even on your team, but it's always good to network and kind of put your foot in the door, and do as much as you can while you're an intern. It's your time to explore.
Perfect. And Steve, we'll just go ahead and assume Joseph's friends are supremely jealous of his
Oh,
job.
yes, the second part of the question. I will say it all depends. Not everybody loves to travel, but a lot of my friends do like to travel. And the first thing when I started this job, they were like, "Oh my gosh, you're gonna get to travel." And within a few weeks in the job, I have a couple of trips planned to Mexico, to France, Italy. So yes, some of them are jealous, but it's fun. It's still work, but it's fun.
Sounds amazing. And we have a question asking if you can elaborate further on partnerships beyond Cirque du Soleil.
Yes, I think it's a little bit tough. Like I said, the partnerships are not just always brands, but I'm trying not to use a couple examples because we have a few things in the works that I'm not allowed to share just yet. But it's also partnering with different brands for. Sorry, I'm trying to think of something I can say without getting in trouble, because we haven't announced some of this stuff yet. But partnerships, a good thing also can be community partnerships. So, for example, if we have a resort that's located in, we have a resort here in Florida, so we look at opportunities of what kind of events are happening in Miami, which is just a quick 2-hour drive from the resort in Florida. And how do we partner with them to make sure that we have a presence at the event, whether it's a community event, whether it's a special occasion. You have things like Art Basel and a couple other kind of fitness trade shows and events here in Florida. So partnering with those companies to align, I think, if they're looking for advice on how these partnerships are formed, the one thing I say is scrutinize what your organization is and what their organization is, kind of identify what the core pillars are for each, and see if those identify together. So if you are launching, let's say, an exclusive collection of a resort, look at what those luxury brands are, who their demographics are, sorry. See if those are the same people you're trying to target, and then you kind of go to them and think of creative ideas, whether it's, can we feature your products in our resort, or can we host something at your event where we have a presence, where we can kind of form an exclusive partnership where our members are going to have a special benefit from you, and your members can receive a special benefit from us. It's
Okay.
making sure that you have a mutually beneficial relationship.
Interesting. Okay, and thank you for that. Let's get right back into PR, of course. In the last moments remaining, can you tell us a little bit about YouTubers and how frequently you work with them or don't work with them?
We do work with YouTubers. I will say, the past couple of weeks I haven't worked with them directly, but it is something that's on our radar to start working with more. My personal experience with YouTube and from people I know is it's not always the best place to seek, kind of find new things, but it's always a place that people go to kind of solidify their choices. So if I am a traveler and let's say I want to go to the Maldives and I look on, I search through Google, what are the best hotels in Maldives, and I find a few, I can go to YouTube and see like what they actually look like. I think sometimes when you look at YouTube, you get a little bit more of a realistic view and a real look at a product, and it seems a little bit more real and trustworthy. So we are trying to work with YouTubers a lot more and kind of create those video logs or vlogs for our resorts.
And then we have a question, if you can elaborate on your Canadian operations, in other words, media and everything we discussed, if the approach is the same or if it's or if you have a specific I don't know, different strategy, different approach in Canada.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. The Canada team is part of the North America team, so I do have a counterpart there that assists with PR, but that's not his only sole responsibility, so we work very closely. They do sit in through video conference on our Monday meetings every single week. We have a very similar strategy. We actually, just a few weeks ago, they flew down, we all met together to help plan for our 2018 year, so our strategy is the same, but the tactics are executed differently because their market and demographics are a little bit different than the US market. For example, in Canada, you don't only have English language, you also have French, so they're able to kind of help identify which markets require the English kind of content, which ones need the French, and they kind of help translate those initiatives, and they work with them a little bit different. There are times where we blend them together for fam trips, but depending on the size of the group and the needs of the journalists, we try to host them separately as well.
Do you have any other fam trip best practices?
For me, like I mentioned, is if you're going to host a fam trip, is you want to make sure you have something newsworthy and kind of compelling for them to want to take a trip. Like one of our readers mentioned, or one of our listeners mentioned, it's very hard for a journalist to take a week-long trip. So sometimes what we do is, and it's not always ideal because it is costly, but you can kind of like shorten those trips to like try to do a long weekend, 3 to 4 days as opposed to a full week, and identify what it is they need. Something that I always recommend for people to do is talk to the journalist ahead of time, identify what it is that they're looking for, what it is that they need, identify what you're trying to convey for this trip, and share that with them. Don't be afraid of being like, this is what we want to highlight, and kind of work together to see what their feedback is, compile all of it together, and form an itinerary that's going to work for each of them.
Okay, that's great. And it looks like we are out of questions at this point, so I think we will wrap up today's event. Joseph, do you have any final thoughts before we finish today's event?
No, just I want to make sure, I love working on travel PR, and anybody who's listening who's thinking about coming into the PR field or travel PR, just don't be discouraged. It's such an exciting time to be in this field. We live in such a global environment now. It's so easy to travel across the world. So it's just such an exciting field, and it's full of surprises, but really good ones. So it's a really exciting field to be a part of.
You've been very generous with your time today, Joseph. I would like to thank you for that, for all the insights that you've provided us. The positive feedback is already trickling in, and would like to wish you success and much joy in your career to come.
Thank you so much. We'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.